Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to things that we Americans do better than us British people. I'm a dual citizen, so that sentence totally makes sense. And on the back of all of those videos that I've been doing recently that are heavy on research, I thought that this video should just be my observations. In other words, now that I've lived in America for 15 years, what are some of the things that people here intuitively get that we don't perhaps in Britain? Apart from, kicking arse. And I realise that this video might seem controversial, but it's important that it is so that people click on it. But I think, as always, it's going to be lighthearted enough that by the end of this video, we're going to all come together in a big group hug, minus Uncle Toby. And if you'd like to share in that group hug and haven't had a chance to subscribe to this channel, do that now. And before we dive into this list, here's a quick word about today's sponsor. In the past year, I've taken to learning a new language, and this doesn't just end at the correct pronunciation of quesadilla. No, I want to learn how to order one in Spanish. And that's why I'm using Babbel. Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world. Inglaterra. Yeah! Wow. For practical purposes, I'm learning Latin American Spanish, but my interest in the language began as a teenager in actual Spain, where I'd laugh at my decidedly non-fluent dad's attempt at speaking Castilian Spanish. And who knows, maybe one day I'll become so fluent that I'll uncover all of the memos that Spain and Mexico lost in the pond. And with Babbel, I just feel like I have a better chance of learning them because they use actual teachers to design the lessons. Babbel even offers live classes, 2 of which you can get for free with your subscription. So let me know in the comments which language you've always wanted to learn and why. Click the link in my description to get 60% off your subscription. In the meantime, here are 6 things that Americans do better than British people, in my opinion. Number 1, or number 6, depending on how you'd like to order this list. Getting to the point. What do I mean by that? Well, when I say getting to the point, what I mean is, if you're willing to listen to me for just 60 seconds on this, Americans, that is citizens of the United States of America, are much better at cutting out some of the faff that comes with some, but by no means all, British conversations. And right there, you may have noticed I was using some of that faff to make a very serious point. Before I moved here, I would dilly-dally my way through conversations by saying things like, Philip, in addition to speaking like a radio presenter from the 1930s, could I possibly maybe put you to the bother of lending me your brolly? Whereas in America, I've learned not to use an umbrella, but also just to ask, Tara, I'm taking your umbrella. That's a declaration, not a question. In other words, here, especially in transactional conversation, we just use fewer words, get to the point straight away, and nobody seems harmed by any of this. Never be afraid of what the other person thinks of your inquiry or question, because so long as you're communicating effectively and with respect, the chances are the outcome will be fine. Okay, this one is based on pretty unscientific observation on my part. Essentially, this comes down to I see more people with massive muscles here than I do in Britain. And don't get me wrong, most Americans, just like most British people, don't actually go to a gym. It's just that there does seem to be a higher percentage of Americans that do have a gym membership compared to in Britain, and this one is backed by science, or general data, because America famously has a gym culture. And how do I know this? Because I was dragged into it once. In my first year of living in the United States, I had a gym membership, and the fact that I only used it to kick a football at a wall should not discount from the fact that I had a gym membership. And when I lived in England, my friends would never talk about going to the gym. It's not that we weren't athletic or anything like that, it's just that we had other ways of achieving fitness, through walking or swimming or, heaven forbid, running. Gym just wasn't a big part of the conversation. But in America, it's baked into many things. When I had a job in downtown Chicago, one of the perks of working there is that you got 10% off at, say, LA Fitness. And it wasn't that I was working for the Chicago Bears, this was a consulting company. And it's quite common for people to receive such perks. My wife, who was a teacher, got the same. And so because of this, I think it's probably less accurate to say that Americans are better at going to the gym than it is to say gymnasiums and gymnasium culture are advertised to them more. And Uncle Toby, if you want to fight about this, just remember that I'm American now and I have 2.5-inch pythons. On the whole, Americans are very, very good at celebrating the success of other people. There are exceptions to this, like my wife's cousin Chad, who believes that I deserve none of this. But on the whole, Americans are just always so quick to congratulate me on becoming and remaining a YouTube sensation. In Britain, depending on the person, it might go like this. Alright mate, how's that YouTube channel of yours going? Yeah, no, it's going great. I don't know if you're familiar with subscriber counts, but 653,000 subscribers. Alright, yeah. Probably all bots, isn't it? Bots? My mum is not a bot. I'm just having banter, lad. I always get confused. And don't get me wrong, I actually value both approaches. When I'm in need of some sort of mental pick-me-up, it is nice to post a tweet saying something like, "Ooh, I've been watched 67 million times this year," or "I got groceries today." Because Americans will always whip out that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio raising a glass. On the other hand, when a British person responds with, "Hey, oh, it's gone to his head again," it brings me back down to earth. It reminds me that instead of hiring domestic staff, I should really just muck in and fix both hot tubs myself. Now it's that time again, isn't it, when both countries save all of their best holidays until the last 60 days of the year. Chief among these in the United States is Thanksgiving and Christmas Day. And in America, this could mean that I'm about to see most of my wife's extended family twice within 30 days. And this can be great, you know, unless my wife's cousin Chad brought the tequila again. What I'm saying is, Americans are better at inviting massive amounts of people. In Britain, pound for pound, the houses are smaller, so we can't fit 57 people in without making the local news. But also, most of us just wouldn't want that many weird uncles in the same room. So we keep it to a small number, and that way there are more sausage rolls for everyone, unless I get to them first. And this, of course, is a big generalization. There will be some British family that host lots of people, and there'll be some American families that host no one. But on the whole, when it comes to holiday house parties, Americans really go to town from inside a house. But despite the excesses of American holidays, there is one surprising thing that I've discovered Americans do better than the British, and it is this. They, now we, are better at not littering. I say that's weird because firstly, you do occasionally see litter just blowing around in the American breeze. But it is to a notably lesser degree than I experienced in Britain. Like even in the woods near to my house where I grew up, you'll occasionally see a Polo mint wrapper or a Snickers bar, or things I can't mention because I don't want to get demonetized again. In places in America that would be considered the equivalent of the towns and cities that I lived in Britain, there's just notably less of it. This was my experience on the West Coast and on the East Coast and some places in between. And we end sort of where we started. Americans are better than British people at speaking Spanish. And in many ways, this assertion is similar to the one that I made about going to the gym. By no means do all Americans speak Spanish, but around 42 million people speak it as their first language in the United States. And a further 15 million have learned it as a second language. It's also the language that comes up the most when I get into a conversation with an American about what languages did you learn at school? And my first answer would be French, and their first answer almost always would be Spanish. And I know what you're thinking, ooh, Lawrence, of course a lot of people speak Spanish in America. There are millions of Americans who came from Spanish-speaking countries or whose ancestors did the same. And that makes total sense, but I think it took living here to realize just how big of a role the Spanish language plays in American society. But it goes deeper than this, because something that I've noticed after living extensively in both countries, Americans are just generally better at pronouncing Spanish words. A fine example of this would be the Spanish dish paella. And notice how I said it there, because that's not how I used to pronounce it when I lived in Britain. Me and most people I knew pronounced it paella. And the first time that I used this pronunciation on an American, he gave me the sort of look that you give to somebody who's weeing in a ditch. And it was at that point that I realised that two L's next to each other in Spanish mean a completely different thing to what they do in Welsh. If I've learned anything from this video, it's that I'm not going to read the comments. But I've also developed a newfound appreciation for my American cousins and my British siblings. People, and although this list was about things that Americans do better than British people, I am leaving this open to a sequel, that being 6 things that British people do better than Americans. If you like what I do here, consider becoming a patron of Lost in the Pond at patreon.com/lostinthepond or by clicking the join button below. Until the next video, goodbye.